Welcome back to the Placeholder Podcast, everybody. I'm Caley Fretz. We've got a great show for you today. Chatting through all kinds of stuff because bike racing is back. Joining me today, Kit Nicholson. Mullet or mohawk?
What?
That's the question.
Or mohawk? Mullet.
Yeah? Jonny, mullet or mohawk?
Mohawk. I've actually cut 3 mohawks in my time. It's the one haircut I can do for people.
Wow. Maybe we should do a bunch of those in Belgium. What do you think?
Yeah, free of charge.
Dane Cash, mullet or mohawk?
Mohawk as well. Jonny, were any of those yours? Did you have a mohawk at some point?
No, the only one I've done is I've given myself a mullet, or kind of mullet. But on other people, I do mohawks, yeah.
I see.
Well, before we get into today's show, I do need to mention we have 2 slots left in our trip to Belgium. If you've listened to this podcast regularly, you know what I'm talking about. This is a 7-night trip. We're going to be staying in Kortrijk. We're going to ride with Johan Museo. We're going to go check out all kinds of interesting stuff in the Flanders region. We're going to ride the Paris-Roubaix Sportif. We're going to go to both the men's and women's Paris-Roubaix races with some special access. This is going to be a really cool trip. And, well, because it's going to be really cool, we've almost sold it out. There's 2 slots left. If you're interested, head over to escapecollective.com/summit and get on it. Because we're all going to be there. All 4 of us right here. We're going to be there. We might even make a podcast for you at some point in person. What do you think?
Scary, surely we will, right? That would be weird if we didn't. Okay. You're doing a tease. I see.
I was doing a tease. All right, let's get into today's show. We're gonna kick things off a little bit differently this week. Jonny Long is gonna do a new segment called Jonny Shorts Racing News. And basically, it's going to be all the things that have happened roughly since last time we made this podcast, more so since the end of last week. Jonny Long Shorts, what do we got?
We begin in New Zealand, where Aaron opened the gate and walked straight through it to take his first ever national road race title. Mark my words, he's maybe going to take a 35th stage win Cavendish, says the passion and commitment from his Astana Kazakhstan teammates during the Tour Colombia stage, which he won, brought tears to me eyes as he gets ready to either fight or fall in love with everyone at this summer's Tour de France. Caleb, are you talking to me? And won the opening day sprint at the Tour of Oman to take the pressure off his second stint back at Jayco Alula. Finn Fisher-Black and Luke Lamperti have also taken stage wins in between the downpours of rain, which have thoroughly ruined everyone's slightly unacceptable Middle Eastern boondoggle. Lucinda Brand-New won one of the quiet things that no one knows as she took the win at the super prestige Middelkerk, while Sailing Del Carmen Alvarado, Don't You Know It's the End of Cyclocross season, now sealed the overall super prestige cyclocross title. Ben O'Connor took his first victory in nearly 2 years and an opening season victory for New Look Decathlon AG2R Le Mondial. Coincidentally, nearly 2 years is how long we could have lost Kate Wagner inside a branch of Decathlon at last year's tour if we hadn't kept her under close supervision. Remco Evenepoel also won his season opener at the Figueira Champions Classic in Portugal, where he attacked solo from 55 kilometers out, saying he enjoyed riding to the line on his own, and he celebrated by miming answering the phone and then emphatically putting it down. It's not yet confirmed if he was making a Pizza Hut order, doing a Jonas Vingegaard and calling his wife, or calling Het Nieuwsblad to say he's leaving for Ineos Grenadiers again. You're making everyone else Mads Pedersen can't stop winning as he takes basically every race going on in France in February. In sadder news, Florian Vermeersch has fractured his femur in a crash at the Vuelta a Murcia. The 2021 Paris-Roubaix runner-up will be out for months and miss the classic season. Richard Carapaz won the Queen stage of the Tour Colombia atop the Alto del Vino, while teammate Rigoberto Urán will retire from his career at the end of the season to become a festival promoter. Olav Don't Be Coy won the Clásica de Almeria with a little help from Visma Lease bike teammate / best lead-out friend, Wout van Aert, the latter of whom said he felt good after his first road race of the year, but then finished last at the Clásica, Dane, can you do the pronunciation?
Jaén.
Which had more than 40 kilometers of gravel sector removed due to rainfall, making the course incredibly muddy, but it was eventually won by Dane.
Oyer Lascano.
FDJ Suez's Amber Crack ensured SD Works Pro Time didn't clog up the entire canal with their own victories at the UAE Tour by making a breakaway move stick with mere meters to go, while Lotte Kopecky put all coaches on notice as she hauled her self-coached self up Hebel Hafit, while Lorena Wiebes won the sprints. Now I need to lie down.
That's a nice place to step off. I don't think you mentioned this in your news roundup, Jonny. the Vlasov-Roglic minor quote war. That's probably overselling it a little bit. But Dane, what was said and why do we think it's, well, a bit silly and worth talking about?
I think Vlasov said something perfectly reasonable. Listeners, you can decide. You can be the judge. Vlasov,
unreasonable.
The context here is that they now ride for the same team. Vlasov has pointed out that, over the next few weeks at the various races that they are going to be doing together, the road is going to decide who's
leader.
No, you know who's going to decide?
Roglic.
Ralph Denk, and he already
the sports
decided
director,
a while ago. Yeah.
I don't think Vlasov loses anything by saying this. He puts himself out there as as a hungry guy. He's saying, I'm hungry for the leadership. And at the same time, as all of us on this podcast know, the road will decide that he is not going to be the leader. But just in case it does, just in case, he's got that.
No.
He's put his feelers out there to say, I wouldn't mind,
So just to be really clear here, so what Alexander Vlasov is saying is Primož Roglic has just come to this team for a bunch of money with a bunch of hoopla. He is the unquestioned sort of leader of this team. However, the road is going to decide who is the leader of this team.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
No. It's crazy talk.
It's,
I mean, full respect to Vlasov, right? He's a very good bike racer. He better than the average bike racer. I'll put it that way. But, they brought Roglic over for a reason, right? And I don't think it's to allow the road to decide whether Alexander Vlasov is a super domestique or not. I think if those two are starting the Tour de France, it's going to be, let's be honest, it's going to be a lot like Jonas Vingegaard and Roglic racing the Tour de France together previously, where yes, okay, technically the road was deciding, but also it had previously been decided.
I would even say it's worse than that because it's like Vingegaard, at least Roglic is a Grand Tour winner who could theoretically really challenge. Vlasov, not so much.
The thing is, it wasn't even he said he said we'll let the road decide, but he followed it up with another thing where he said it's not like I'm going to be pulling for him from the first kilometre, which is just, that's not what you want from of your super domestiques. Pogacar's not there with Rafael Majka and Adam Yates being like, yeah, but we could, this isn't some Talladega Nights situation where it's like, yeah, but maybe you could let me win one. It's it's not how it works.
I guess he's right. That's not going to be his job technically, but we're talking a lot of technicalities here. I feel like really that it's the gist of it's the thrust of the statement that sort of doesn't jive with reality. And again, we wish Alexander Vlasov all the best. It's just sort of a funny thing to say. When this particular person's just come to your team.
It might be worth pointing out, without trying to rub any salt in any potentially exposed wounds, he has a little bit of form in this sort of feuding. I mean, quite recently, in road racing terms anyway, the Vuelta, when apparently he and Keanu Brooks were going to be, were equal leaders and they weren't going to attack each other in the last week when they were 6th and 7th or 7th and 8th overall.
Yeah, something like that.
And Vlasov attacked Brooks, and it was, I think it was mentioned a few times, maybe not as an actual main reason that he left and went to Jumbo. Visma Lease Bike. Yeah, the attacking that happened, the infighting that happened, it's, you'd like to think that with someone who's fighting for the podium, they might pull the strings a little bit tighter, but we'll see, I guess.
Maybe he's just the most literal man on planet Earth, where if someone asks him oh, well, who's going to be the leader? It's well, it depends who finishes first or second.
That's how I'm doing this.
But I also
but that's not how bike racing works.
But I also don't. I feel every time something comes up like this, I feel bad when we just immediately sort of go in on them or make a whole joke and palaver out of it, because I appreciate guys sticking their necks out to be the heels of the sport, because it makes it way more fun. And I complain all the time about riders not saying anything, and Vlasov's come out, he's backed himself, and maybe if it works, we'll have to join the Vlasov fan club.
He is also kind of right that, Adam Yates won't be pulling for Pogacar from kilometre 1 unless Pogacar crashes in kilometre 1 is in 10 minutes off the back with only Adam Yates. There is some, and Roglic has form in crashing. Not that Vlasov is going to end up on the podium and win the race, but
if Pogacar asked Adam Yates to do that,
true,
he would do it.
Yes.
I just don't understand how you look at the man who just showed up on your team and is now determining what salad you eat and think that you have any chance of being a team leader.
Maybe that's why.
With him in your team.
He was content to be a good teammate, and then he's walking He's in the cafeteria with his salad in his hand. His Primus comes over and says, no, different salad. And now he's decided he needs to, express his dissent.
Vlasov's wheeled in a whole salad bar. He's been leaning back on it, like giving it a real and then Roglic just come over and it's like asking, what's this? And it's like, oh, this is the Bora Hansgrohe salad bar.
I think that's enough on that particular story. We just thought it was funny. There's lots more to talk about this week. Should we head to a deep, dark place? A sad place? Should we head to Dane's doping dungeon? Dane, what's in your doping dungeon?
Yeah, you don't really get
this week.
You don't have a choice whether you go to the dungeon or not. You just end up there. It's unfortunate.
Dungeons do work. Yeah,
that's what happens. Generally speaking, you don't volunteer to go down there. You're down there because, for instance, you're under investigation by French or Spanish doping authorities, or maybe you tested positive for something, and that's where we find ourselves here in the doping dungeon. We've got actually quite a bit of doping news lately, which is it's not fun. I don't think any of us really wants the doping news.
It's unusual though these days.
Yeah, that's true.
Right?
That's true. We are in a time when we get fewer of these stories than we're used to in the past. But yeah, so Antoine Tolhoek is one of those currently hanging out in the dungeon. Mr. Tolhoek tested positive late last year while he was in Thailand.
Thailand, yeah.
Or just got back or something.
Yeah, and it was in November, it was the end of the year.
Yeah.
And he tested positive for a steroid, anabolic androgenic steroid, which is, as Kit pointed out when we were discussing this topic earlier in our planning session, it's old school. That's some old school doping. And yeah, that happened in November when he was still technically a member of Little Trek, although he had since finished his last race. He went on to sign with a continental team. So he's been riding at a continental team for the first month and a half of the year, Saab Gol and a color. And he has since been suspended because you can't be taking banned substances, as he has found out. So Tolhoek is a former member, by the way, of the Jumbo team. Now, again, he's a continental rider, but he went from Jumbo to Little Trek. So he has had some experience on the World Tour, and now he will be sitting for a little while as he waits for the result of this finding.
We don't have a lot of the sort of quite important information just yet, but this does seem like a relatively likely candidate for contamination. He's in Thailand. I don't mean to disparage Thailand in any way, but probably has sort of slightly more lax laws around livestock and meat and things like
probably.
that. It's the same as like riders saying that you have to be quite careful if you go to places like Mexico or things like that. So I think it's a decently likely scenario that this is contamination, and it does bring up the old discussion that we've had a number of times on this podcast. And in fact, Joe Lindsay and I were talking about doing a deeper written piece on this sometime soon. It's just the level of testing that is now available is a lot more sensitive than it was even a couple of years ago, and so it feels like we're getting a lot more of these kind of contamination cases. And of course, due to the strict liability rules in anti-doping, meaning that you are responsible for anything in your body regardless of how it got there, it starts to feel a bit silly, right? Like, let's work off the hypothetical that Antoine just ate some meat and then ended up with a doping positive. Like, that starts to, like, what's the point at some point? Like, if the trace amounts are so small, what is the point? The other thing that makes me think that this is maybe a contamination thing is it's not really a drug that anyone takes anymore. I mean, you guys kind of sort of made jokes about it being old school. Like, it's really easy to detect at almost any level, right? So, like, unless he didn't think he was going to get tested for weeks and weeks and weeks, there's just not something you would take. So that stuff doesn't add up for me. And I think there's just a broader question about, it's like, what is the point of looking for amounts that small, given all the things that are sort of floating around our bodies at any given point in time in the modern world?
I guess maybe it's to do with all the rumors going around that, like, riders may be microdosing now, so maybe that's why they've, like, fine-tuned their testing kits. I mean, the other thing is that I can't remember exactly who it was, but one of Tolhoek's former teammates actually came out and said there's no way he's doping, which you don't really get that much more. Like, other riders, like, sticking their neck on the line. All I hope is that at his UCI tribunal, or whatever it is, he stands up and says, "What is the charge? Enjoying a meal, a succulent Thai meal." And if you get that reference, it's a great video.
10 points for you. Yeah, again, we don't know. We don't know where this came from. It's entirely possible he was doing steroids. I think it's relatively unlikely, but again, it's something that we want to poke around at a little bit more because, like the purpose is clean sport. Is this helping clean sport? That's the question for me. And I don't really know the answer. I'm not saying it does or doesn't right now. I'm just saying that like some of it just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me.
Are these steroids that like make you the same ones that like gym bros take to make you jacked? Because if you Google a picture of Antoine Tolhoek, he's 12. In our medieval 13th century universe, he is also like hiding behind like the cart while his parents are massacred by an invading tribe. Like he's super skinny and does not look like roids have been in his vicinity for his whole life.
They can also be used to sort of like lean out and things like that. Like they can be used in different ways. But yeah, the sort of traditional means is take a bunch of those, eat a bunch of protein and lift a bunch of heavy things and get swole, right? And he hasn't done that. We can tell just by looking at him that's not the case.
If he turned up just that one race, would be like, okay,
suddenly he's a sprinter.
Yeah. Well, the Vikings have like come and destroyed his village. Now that's his reason to start taking them, I think.
And he wants revenge.
Right?
Oh my God.
In your analogy, this is I feel like it's a good time to take them. But anyway.
Dane, who else is in the doping dungeon with you?
Surprising number of people are in the doping dungeon with me.
Is Dane in the dungeon, or is it your dungeon?
Yeah,
You're commandant of the dungeon. Yeah,
I may run this segment, but I'm not sitting in the dungeon with him. Nairo Quintana's doctor, the doctor that worked with the Arkea Samsic team at the Tour de France in 2020, he came in kind of temporarily. He was not full time with the team, I do not think. And while Arkea Samsic was at that Tour de France, the French authorities decided to raid their hotel and see what they could find among this doctor's things. Apparently, they found basically equipment that was used for injections, which obviously needles, but I don't know what else that might entail. Like, what else do you need for injections?
Syringes?
Bags of things that then go into the tubes that are running to the needles, maybe. Anyway, that doctor, this was 4 years ago now, but that doctor has been charged in Marseille, and he is awaiting trial and faces charges for wording here. Well, it's in French, but in English it would be.
No, give us the French.
Give us the French, Dane.
Of a substance or method prohibited for use by an athlete without medical justification. In this case, equipment, tools, products, and devices allowing implementing infusions and or intravenous injections. So.
Maybe he was just dealing with hangovers. It's just like an IV.
Well, the funny thing is, he's a doctor, and like most doctors do know how to administer an IV. It's a pretty essential thing, but in cycling, it's a no-no.
Well, there's a no needle policy,
right.
which just to remind everybody out there, like it doesn't really matter what you're using the needle for. There's just no needles allowed in cycling anymore.
Well, you can't. I mean, if you get into a serious accident or something, and you need a blood transfusion. They're not gonna.
Yeah,
like,
but you're also not going to start the race the next day.
At that point, you probably don't
no
care,
needle
do you,
policy
about a doping.
The hospital still has needles, but there's no like the team doctor on the team bus doesn't have needles.
You're bleeding out. It's like, no, my good name.
Yeah, sorry. Just a quick roundup of the other doping news, because there is so much this week. We've got news out of Spain, reports about the Operation Ilex, which is the government authorities probing into a doping ring that has already gotten Miguel Angel Lopez suspended for his alleged involvement. We don't know. I gotta say alleged. But there's a doctor in Spain who was allegedly running a doping ring, and the report suggested that it involved a number of people, but at the same time, that evidence for actually charging these people was not forthcoming, so they might reduce the scope of the probe. And then we also heard from Marca, the Spanish newspaper, that their sources within Spanish anti-doping suggest that current anti-doping measures are not that effective for catching dopers. That was one or two sources within Spanish anti-doping. Who knows? But yeah, not great.
So I guess that's kind of what I was referring to with the Antoine Tolhoek thing. Is like we keep hearing that maybe the measures that are currently in place are not actually that effective at catching real doping, but they seem to be particularly effective at catching people who accidentally consume something.
We should. I mean, we should think like we don't know. Antoine Tolhoek could have taken way too much of this bad substance.
But there's half a dozen other examples of like contamination where the doping authorities have agreed that it was contamination in the last couple of years, and that rate seems to be increasing. Here's a rhetorical question, existential question. This is an endurance sport, right? And people do bad things. sort of like set those two realities before us. Are we kind of due like a big ugly doping scandal? Because it's been a while, and
I think you said, "Are we going to do?" I was like, "Hang on, what does he mean?"
No. Are we due? Is cycling due?
Yeah.
So I guess I'm kind of worried about this, right? We hear these things from Marca that the Spanish authorities are like, well, we're just not particularly effective at this point in time. Like, I don't think that human nature has fundamentally shifted, right? I think that, culturally the sport is a different place than it was 20 years ago, but human nature hasn't shifted, and people will continue to try to do things. It's just the reality. I just wonder if we're due for something big and ugly, I'm to be really clear, I'm not hoping for this. Like, this is something that would be terrible for the sport at this point. It feels like it's come so far. There's sort of like lots of data points floating around out there that have me concerned. And again, I'm not saying that like the whole peloton's dirty. I'm just saying that some piece of it might be. I wonder if we're due.
Yeah,
That's
I'm
existential
cautiously
rhetorical
optimistic about the morality of most of the peloton, at any rate. But my view on doping as a kind of concept, and that's for several decades, is that the kinds of testing protocols, and or at least the way that the governing bodies, or where they are at in the doping process, is about a decade behind where the athletes are. So what's being done now, if there is a doping scandal around the corner, is going to be something that WADA has no idea about, or if they do, they have no idea what to do about it yet, and they don't know how to find out or to track it down, or it's just too smart and too well figured out that it's, I don't know, that it will become, it's going to get so much bigger before there's any chance of it being brought down. So I think it's much more, if it's happening, which I'm sure it is in some respect, it's happening on a much more, covert scale, a bit more James Bondy than it has been before, where you're in a caravan and you're squeezing blood bags.
Yeah, I mean, because like a significant portion of the existing doctors and team managers were all there for the first time around when they were all doping and got caught. So they've like learned how to not get caught this time. So I think that's different. And also the big scandals come usually, I'm thinking more about the Armstrong one, which is the obvious one, but it's when someone, when you have a whistleblower. So I think that's the only way that you actually get these things, because nowadays you can tie it all up in like legal battles, or like we see it now with those cyclocross racers blaming the French dairy farmers and all this. And there's various examples like this. Like now when we're throwing in, but it's contamination, like that's also a great cover, isn't it? And that's something that you can defeat by legal means. So I don't see a big scat. Like, I think the teams are too big, they're too clever now, if there are any that are dodgy. Like, and maybe they're not, maybe it's cleaner, but I always still have suspicions, but I just don't think we're going to have a big thing.
I guess my concern is that, just like Kit said, the testing is probably not as effective as it not as it could be, because they're doing their best, I guess, but it's just not that effective, period. That means you're basically entirely reliant on culture, right? And I wonder how strong the culture is and how long that will last, basically. I don't mean to bring all this down. I was just sitting around just thinking about this when we were running through the doping dungeon, because it was a lot this week, right? Like it was a lot more than normal in a given week. That's why we gave it a name. Yeah, I wonder how strong that culture is, and whether it's enough to beat back again the sort of like the darker side of human nature. Maybe that got dark. Let's move on.
Yeah, well, maybe people are better now. Like maybe human nature has changed. People in the 90s just weren't great, and people are just better now.
I'm sorry, but the 90s were fantastic. I don't know what you're talking about.
I think just on everyone being better. The one thing that has changed dramatically in the sport in the past decade, and maybe it's another cover-up, but it's nutrition and understanding recovery and everything else that goes into being an athlete, off the bike, away from the races, every other day of the year. So there are lots of contributing factors that, that make me hopeful, and that's why we're still here. But
Ronan's doing a whole series on that right now, right? Like all the things that have improved since the doping era that have, are at least partially responsible for the fact that like speeds are as high as they were back then, right? Not saying that is the 100% the reason why speeds are as high. Where again, we don't know, we do not know, but there's certainly a lot of evidence to point aerodynamics and nutrition and all these things that have made bike racers a lot faster without illegal means. So anyway, that's enough of that.
Let's scrabble out the dungeon.
I apologize for bringing it up. Let's get out of the dungeon. Well, Dane, is that the entirety of everyone in the dungeon? Is there anybody else in the dungeon that we don't know about yet?
Well, let's just make it quick. Frank Bonamore also.
Bloody Frank.
Yeah, sorry. He had abnormality in his biological passport. So he is also hanging out down there. But we can leave. We can leave the dungeon.
We're going to scrabble our way out of the dungeon. Brief intermission here, because we have a really cool series that I want you all to hear a bit of. We're going to play a couple minutes of a 4-part series, an industry special that Wade has put together. And it's focused on basically what's going on in the bike industry right now and why the industry is in such big trouble. So the first 2 episodes of the series are already out. They say industry special if you're looking at your podcast feed. If you want to look it up, it's also on the homepage right now. And we'll be dropping every single one of the 4 episodes onto the homepage as they come out. Anyway, just wanted to drop a couple minutes of that show in here so you can get a little taste of it. And then we'll be back to your regular Placeholders programming.
Everyone, whether you were a bike shop owner or a sandwich shop, your first reaction was, holy smokes, I'm going to have to close my business.
In the weeks leading up to COVID closures, we actually had a dumpster catch fire inside of our primary warehouse. So we started COVID off with a literal dumpster fire.
It wasn't that long before all of a sudden we started seeing more demand again, and people started to realize that, hey, riding a bike is something I still can do.
There was a time where I was speaking to our SRAM rep, and he told me we have $2 billion of open orders. And I'm like, you can't possibly believe those are real orders.
Either every existing bicycle owner has to buy another one in the next 5 years, or the entire third world has to walk into the playing field and start buying high-end bicycles. There's just no way. Like it just breaks simple math.
In the history of what sport in the universe has the sport retained someone who tries the sport for the first time at 80%? No sport ever.
All these retailers that had been talking about how confident they are about next year, rapidly losing confidence.
We just received a container of this Grupo that we've had on back order for months. When we called our customers, none of the business was there because the other distributor had gotten their container a couple days earlier.
All of these bikes that were waiting on something, now that something has now finally started to arrive. You need to take these. You ordered them. Here they are.
Trying to do it in a conservative way so that you don't get caught holding the bag eventually.
The more understanding as an industry that we have of where we stand, the more we're going to be able to do a better job to work through this together.
Colombia, where Rigoberto Urán is retiring. This makes me sad, but we have talked about him previously on this podcast and all the other things that he does and the fact that he's like building an empire basically down in Colombia. But how do we feel about this? He put out a sort of a tearful thing with Laura Messiger, the Eurosport host. Was it on Sunday? He's going to be out. One of the sort of like stalwarts of the last 10 years, I would say.
Yeah, it's another one of those changing era that, it'd be a shame to see him go, but, he'll step aside for somebody else and he'll definitely stick around in cycling, or at least his name will, and he'll pop up every so often. And, he's not going to disappear.
He's also got the best, post-racing life panned out. We've seen it this off-season where he, puts on these massive festivals, basically, music festivals, and he runs out on stage, getting the crowd to sing and dance and everything, and then he just invites Wout van Aert out and to do his sportives, and they'll just be dancing, going for dinner, and getting face masks. Just why would you carry on when you've seen what your life could be without all this racing in Europe stuff?
He did say, not to bring it down, but he did say that the thought of retiring was, it's kind of scary because that's what he has done for so long. Yeah. And he was pretty forthcoming about that in some various press conferences and interviews that he was involved in the last couple of weeks. Kind of saying that, he had planned to retire, but also, I don't know, because, what do I do now? And obviously he's made the call that he's going to hang up the proverbial wheels at the end of the year. But I think it is tough. When you don't, that's his life. But at the same time, he, maybe more so than others, has prepared himself for what's next.
By launching a music festival.
And a TV show, and
it's deeply impressive. The man is deeply impressive. That the fact that he has built this whole thing while being a professional bike racer. I've dealt with a fair number of professional bike racers in my time. It's hard to get them to email you back. most of the time.
Yeah.
The fact that he has done all of this is frankly, it's impressive. It's shocking. And wow, he's been a fun bike racer to watch. Like I will never forget the stage of the Tour de France that he won. He was in a breakaway. His Di2 stopped working. A Mavic neutral mechanic named Maxime reached out the back window and I think put his derailleur into the 11 was what he did. So he's in the 5311, right? Biggest gear he's got on the bike. Does this like slow motion sprint against, I think it was 4 or 5 other guys, and wins it with no shifting. Incredible. Just like one of the coolest, most ridiculous days I've ever covered at the Tour de France. And thank you to Rigo for adding a bit of spice to bike racing for the last 10 years. We wish you all the best after you do hang up the proverbial wheels, as Dane said. He is going to stick around through the rest of the year, though, right? Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Yeah. All right, so we get one more year of Rigo. That's good. One more season of Rigo. We didn't really mention 2 things that are happening currently on this podcast. One is that Kit's got her lovely puppy sitting on her lap, which is keeping you warm, I believe.
Very much so.
And the other is that Johnny is in Oman. He's calling in from Oman. Johnny, what's Oman like? Do you like Oman?
Yeah.
Is it good?
It's good. Better than Saudi Arabia, which, I guess doesn't say much. The weather has hampered things. Basically, they get 3 days of rain usually all year, and I've been here for 2 of them, and they were very heavy days of rain at that, by which I mean that, like, the country's basically shut down. I think, like, people have died because, like, the water just doesn't soak into the ground. Like the infrastructure's not built for rain. So I'm in Muscat, and then behind Muscat there's like the start of the mountain range, and then everything the other side of that is apparently still just drenched like a couple of days later. So every day the races have been shortened and like climbs taken out. Like didn't get to go to Eastern Mountain, which sounds great. I've always wanted to go to a place called Eastern Mountain. Just got a message through the mayor, so we are still going to Green Mountain tomorrow. But I can almost promise you it's not going to be green, because the one thing about Oman, the people are lovely, but the landscapes are all basically the same, and it's just very same rocky everywhere. But I've had a good time. I'm not going to complain. I'm on a free trip. It could. Oh, you think it could be green?
Well, so speaking as somebody who lives relatively close to a desert, I've spent a fair amount of time in the desert, Moab and Utah and things like that, right? Right after a rain, some crazy things happen in the desert because they don't get rain very often. So all the plants are like, holy shit, rain. And they all go crazy for like a week afterward.
It might be green then.
So you could see, I have zero clue what Oman looks like after a rainstorm. But I've been in the desert here after a rainstorm. Plants just sort of pop out of nowhere. A lot of the cacti will flower, like stuff like that. So it could be incredible, actually. You could be in for a real treat up on Green Mountain.
As somebody who has been to Green Mountain and watched Alexei climb up Green Mountain very fast.
A classic day.
I will say that relative to other parts of Oman, there is some green.
Okay.
I think relative to what you are used to, I think maybe in Oman it earns the name, but elsewhere it's not that green. But yeah, maybe after the rain, I don't know.
But look, it's been a good bike race. Been chatting to like Luke Lamperti. Like the reason to go to these races is because there aren't any fans. Everyone spends like time like sitting at the starts, just like intent. So you can just go up and like talk to people, and they don't really have anything else to do. So that's where you go. You get a few interviews done. Personally, it's been great. I've had stable Wi-Fi in my hotel room, which I don't have back at home. And you guys can't really see behind me. You can see the start of the bed. The bed is big enough, and I'm like 6'1". I can lie down like across it, and I don't go off the end of it. I feel like Caley, for you, if you went on this trip and you'd come here, and it'd be like a break from like a deserved break from like looking after your 2 kids, where you just get to like only like focus on yourself, do whatever you want. That's how I feel, except I don't have any children or any real stress in my life yet. It has also been a cleansing experience, which makes me worried for the future. But yeah, I'm going to do another big like feature on my time here, and then I think in Escape After Dark today, I'm gonna just share some more. They're not spicy, just like more like funny things that have happened.
The other thing we're getting in Escape After Dark today is we got a bunch of limericks from listeners. So I'm going to just quiz you all, and there'll be some bonus points available, but only in Escape After Dark, which means you have to be a member. Go sign up, escapecollective.com/join. Welcome back, everybody. we're going to do as we do almost every week. We're going to circle the plug hole now. We have a comment in from the Escape Collective Discord. This is from R22. ARRR22. I don't know your real name. Sorry. Pirate man.
Captain Hook.
Captain Hook. We'll call you Captain Hook. It's an interesting comment, and I think it'll kick off a little bit of interesting discussion here. Says, I was thinking about how to compete with ASO. Now, this is again in relation to the one cycling, the 250 million from the Saudis, et cetera, et cetera. How do you take on ASO within the cycling space? Back to the quote here. A race series where the stars have to compete in all the races, or something that has a point system based on individual riders would be a start, which I would agree with. If I was going to compete with ASO properties, I would start by starting a big race to go against the Vuelta. Maybe a tour of South America. 3 weeks in Colombia, Peru, Ecuador. The problem would be transfers. Tour of Japan would also be interesting. There are plenty of potential courses with narrow roads and steep climbs there. In general, I would start races that compete with as many ASO properties as possible, except the Tour de France. Anything to establish competition would be at least a decade-long project, with the obvious risk of damaging all the existing races while failing to build a successful new thing. If the new thing can't sustain itself, then it will eventually fold no matter how good the races it creates are. So there's an interesting idea. So the core concept here from our man, actually I don't know if it's man, from our Discord member,
Pirate.
Captain Hook, Pirate, our chief pirate, is that you create a bunch of events, but you don't compete with the tour. Because as we were talking about last week in the sort of like, is cycling a sport of events or of athletes, I would think it kind of falls more on the event side at this point in time. And the Tour de France is still the biggest, most powerful thing in the entire sport. So you create these events that don't compete with the tour, but do pull the biggest names in the sport. So you do lean on the big names and the athlete side. What do you guys think of this?
I'll go. I think when it comes to this specific example with the sort of Saudi sports washing project, I think everyone has their price when like you accept the sports washing. Like for some sort of accountants or architects, it's like a huge salary. For me, in this instance, it would be if the Saudis put their money into making grand tours in South America and Japan, and like use the money to because both countries would be fairly cheap to run a bike race, at least cheaper than doing it in like in North America or Europe. Because it's like at the start, you just make it free to air, you put it on YouTube or whatever, stream it live, and that is something that I think would definitely get younger fans involved who would just be able to pull up YouTube or whatever, and it'll be, that's how we've seen the success of GCN or Lanterne Rouge, is because they go direct to where potential fans are waiting. And that's something that could really upset the apple cart and show ASO and other RCS maybe, of how to do things, how to do things differently, and that you can't just keep doing the same thing with a closed market maybe. But would you Dane's gonna have an answer, but would you rather watch the Vuelta for 3 weeks after you've already had the Giro, the Tour, all the classics, everything? It's like getting to the point where you're fully sated with bike racing, but then it's like Tour of Japan, 3 weeks in Japan, all going around, amazing scenery, helicopters everywhere, filming everything, or in South America where you're seeing all these other great landscapes.
I mean, I'd rather watch the Vuelta, obviously, Johnny. How dare you?
Yeah, obviously.
I do like, as a plan, I think what you're saying makes sense. However, I don't know. I mean, that's sort of the Live Golf model, right? And yet I don't know whether the viewership numbers for Live really so far are promising.
But it's not a better
but
product,
again,
that's why.
Yeah, so like Live thought that they could just pull all the athletes over, right? They're paying Phil Nicholson, was it 200 million? So that puts the 250 for cycling in context, right? Like they're paying 200 million for one dude as opposed to 250 for a whole sport. Yeah, and the whole idea was you pull over these big names, and the theory was that, it doesn't matter what the history of the event is or what course you're playing on or whatever. And I think that ended up being false, right? Like the other way to, if we can sort of fully dissect Live, like the other way to sort of think about that is it was forcing PGA's hand, and they've kind of now collaborated, right? And so could you build something that scared ASO into working with you? Is maybe the other way of thinking about it. And I think that's maybe what our pirate friend is talking about, is like, can you build something that hurts the Vuelta or hurts the classics such that ASO and Flanders Classics and whatever else have to work with you, right? And if you've got enough cash, to your point, Johnny, that everybody has their price, like there is a price at which you're going to get Tadej Pogacar and Jonas Vingegaard at a bike race together, right? Every single time. There is a price where that will happen. Either because you're handing it to their team owners or you're handing it just straight to them.
The other thing is there would be, like with these two specific examples of South America and Japan, is there is theoretically like a path to sustainability with these events, because there are underserved markets there. Like you see it like the Saitama Criterium in like Japan Cup or like Tour Colombia, is that these are cycling nations, just not within the narrow definition of our sort of Western frame of mind. Like even if people are tuning into the Vuelta in Europe more than they're tuning into the other races, if they go to South America, put on a massive race, they're going to get loads of viewers. There's like these are both huge economies, and in Japan, so maybe that's another route. And then like it's a slowly over time, because you're not going to like defeat ASO in a couple of years, right?
No, it'd take a very long time. Yeah, I mean, I think fundamentally, like, you know, this is an idea that was started within cycling, and then they went and found investment. That's where the 250 million is coming from, right? So I think we'll find out relatively soon what the sort of idea is here. And again, I think it's coming from like soonish. Yeah, I think somebody will start to talk, right? Like there's a whole bunch of teams involved in this. There's enough people involved in this that things will start to leak out. So I think we will get more information soon. We're certainly working to find that information right here. I think for now, maybe we'll leave it there. Appreciate the interesting thought there. R22. We will continue to circle the plug hole as necessary in the coming weeks. But now let's take a quick break before we come back with some weekly pain. Welcome back, everybody. It's time for this week's Weekly Pain. We actually have our member competition once again. Scott Law is back.
All right, round 2. Scott Law back here for another attempt to take on his former on-post teammate, Ronan McLaughlin, in the Weekly Pain member challenge, member showdown, whatever we want to call it. I don't think it has an official name, so we just call it what we want. Scott, you triumphed by naming Alpecin de Koning riders, and you went pretty far down the line, actually. I was super impressed with both of you. So, you know, Ronan, even though you lost, tip of the cap, you know, tip of the old chapeau to you there, sir. It was a good battle. We're going to continue with round 2 here, another categories question. And Scott, we're going to start with you this time, since you have proven yourself a fierce competitor. And this one, it might also go a little bit long. I don't know if I picked a good category, because it might just be here for a while, but here we go. Countries in which World Tour races are run in 2024, men's or women's.
I would feel a sense of non-patriotism to not say Australia.
Yeah, I think that would be a good one to start with, right? Also, it's timely.
Yeah.
Ronan?
I will go for the land that Scott and I shared, Belgium.
Do they do World Tour races there? They do. Okay. Yeah.
Sometimes, yeah.
They do.
Cycling's not a big thing there, but...
Scott, over to you.
I will go for my friends across the ditch in New Zealand.
They don't have a World Tour race, Scott.
The look of surprise on everybody's face.
Oh, man.
Oh, I must have just diddled myself. Oh, God.
But you showed it's like the Anzac spirit. Isn't that what they call it down there? You know, the unity of your two countries. That'll be appreciated by our Kiwi listeners, but I gotta say, not a World Tour. Maybe Sam Gaines will get one down there. Ronan, if you can name...
Would you like me to name Italy, France, Spain?
Come on. Scott's been such a good sport. He's been so...
you may as well put the boot into me. I deserve it.
Oh, man.
Maybe the only chance I ever get.
For what it's worth, Scott, that sort of, you know, I think Ronan and I both know that if you sat down and had to make a list of countries, you would come up with 20 at least, and you wouldn't put New Zealand on there. But being on the spot, man, it's hard. It's a challenge.
Yeah. I was thinking of the New Zealand Cycle Classic because they just recently had it, and I was like, oh yeah,
they certainly have events,
but not an actual
not the World Tour level.
The one that I had got that I thought might have been a winner for me was Canada.
Our Canadian listeners will be offended that you think that that's a tricky one, but
no, it's not. I mean, it's not tricky because I got it. So it was one of the first ones I wrote down. But
even I was thinking like Norway, like
that's what I was going to say. The question I was going to have was, is it Norway or Sweden that has the women's World Tour?
Well, I was going to count both of them actually for that specific instance. Yeah. So had we gotten there, And, in the future, because we only got a couple of them there, maybe we could just return to this question, say round 2 of, countries that host. Scott, first of all, you did make it here to this stage, which is a twofold achievement. First of all, you answered enough of my emails saying, I'm so sorry, we're going to have to reschedule, that you deserve credit. And second, you did beat Ronan in a battle here. And so congratulations on making it to round 2. And thanks for being a part of the member showdown. And if you want to be cool like Scott, then you should head on over to escapecollective.com/join and become a member so that you can then take on Ronan or myself, or maybe even we'll make Caley do this sometime, maybe, as the person being challenged, so that he's not always in this judge's position of power. I do kind of like it. I like the power.
Oh, sorry, Scott. Had to end sometime. Well, we'll be reaching back out. We need another member to compete with starting soon. So Dane, you're on that.
Yeah, 2 things. First of all, I said this a couple times, but thanks to Scott for being so patient with the setup process. We told him like a long time ago that we were going to do this. We finally made it happen with the various time zones. And yeah, we've got another member coming up here soon enough. So yeah.
Is it always Ronan that takes them on, or can the rest of us have a go?
You're allowed to take them on.
Yeah, Johnny, you're on tech next week.
In this specific instance, Scott's a former teammate of Ronan's.
Oh, okay.
So we made the executive. I made the executive decision that he was going to have to.
I'm just feeling moreish for some weekly pain after having not had any for a while.
Well, we'll have a little microdose in Escape After Dark here. A little bit of pain, small amount of pain. Yeah. No, but the members can challenge whoever they want. That's the thing.
Oh, they get to choose.
They can challenge me if they want to. Yeah, they can choose. So we'll chat with the next member and see who they want to challenge. If you would like to be on the show, there's a link in the Discord. I'll drop it back in after the show goes up, and you can just click on that and fill out a little form, and then we reach out to you. We do have a pile of folks that have responded already, and we can only get through so many, but we'll add you to the list and, get you sometime later this year.
Yeah, it's a long list, and also every time anybody stays on for more than a show, there's just more time. So, yeah, your fellow potential contestant.
I mean, maybe at some point, if too many people want to do it, we may just sort of run them a bit quicker. So maybe multiple games inside of one episode, for example. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. We could just do a whole show of games, just a whole episode of games. If you would like to hear that, let us know. If you want us to do an entire show of games, that would be kind of fun. I mean, Johnny, you kind of did that right before Christmas. So wasn't too far off.
Yeah,
right?
It's true.
All right. That's it for the regular show this week. We, of course, do have Escape After Dark coming up for members only. So if you are on the member feed, this pod is going to keep going. If you're on the regular free feed, this is the end, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye-bye.